Did somebody say cheesehead? I literally got cheese on my head. I take it literally. It won't stay on my head, but what's cool and what's going on? We have the Green Bay Packers today. We're going to be going through this roster, talking about what they need to do to improve. It was a successful season, a good season. However, at the end of the year, things fell off a little bit. There were some injuries, and we got some discussions to have with some really big players. So let's talk about it. We'll go through the roster first off, free agency strategy, and get into a 7-round mock draft for the Green Bay Packer Cheeseheads. It'd be a good challenge, though, for me to balance that cheese on my head for the entirety of this video. Oh, that'd be dedication. Let's go into this offensive line. Start off with the interior. And this interior offensive line, to me, they have their starters going forward, but they need some more depth in the room. I think that was the biggest thing for them was when they had injuries, when Josh Myers went down to the versus the Eagles there. Like, they were trying to get Sean Ryan to snap over at center, and it's like they need a little bit more depth. You got Jacob Monk, who I think nice can be a good developmental backup center, and who knows, down the line could be a starter for them. I just feel like between Jordan Morgan getting injured too and being out for the season, they were so thin. They were relying on guys like Telford and Glover there, and that didn't work out. Besides that, you see what I'm saying? Like, the depth was so thin. That is the area that they're going to have to work on this offseason, is building up some depth here. But Elton Jenkins, good starter, gives you versatility inside out. You got Sean Ryan, who's been solid and whatnot. Jordan Morgan, when he gets healthy, I think will be a nice add for them. I do think that they're going to have to look at the center position, of course. Josh Myers being a free agent. The one thing I will give him, besides that injury that he had at the end of the season, and then also his rookie season, he's been reliable. He's been available. And he's been a solid center. I would definitely not say you're going to want to pay him a ton of money. If he comes back cheap, I'm fine on that. But with this center market and where it's at right now, and especially in the draft class too, I think that he'll probably at least get like $6 to $7 million in the open market. I just don't know if I'm willing to pay him that. I'd rather move Elton Jenkins or Sean Ryan inside to center full time. Jenkins it'd probably be the most viable candidate to do that. And you put Morgan over at left guard, have Ryan at right guard, and then, like I talked about, move Elton Jenkins back into center. I think it'd be a really good option for them. And with that versatility that he brings, that just makes the most sense off the top of my mind. And then just draft some interior players and get some more depth there, because that's something they need to do. Plus, in free agency, I would say pick up somebody in a veteran presence that can come in here to give you some flexibility on the interior. Tackle-wise, same thing. You got your starters going into next year, Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, two really good offensive linemen. Walker's been very reliable at that left tackle position, and then Zach Tom at right tackle, both been very good football players. And I know there's been some discussions about moving Zach Tom even inside to center. Gudikun said, hey, look, I think he could be a Hall of Fame level center, and I wouldn't doubt that by any means, but he is a very good right tackle. He did struggle versus the Eagles. That entire offensive line really struggled, man. That's the reason why they lost that game, in my opinion. But overall, I would just say find some depth. You got Andre Dillard, who's a free agent. They definitely need depth. Now, Jordan Morgan, I'm sure, can kick over to tackle if they need him to. No matter what, though, between free agency and the draft, I'll be looking at adding some much-needed depth behind these guys. On to the tight end position, and it starts with the Kraft Yak and Cheese man himself. Number 85, Tucker Kraft. And yeah, if only I had 85 boxes of mac and cheese on my show. Oh, man, we'd be vibing today. But no, Tucker Kraft's a stud. You got Luke Musgrave dealing with injuries this year, but still a solid player. Ben Sims, John Fitzpatrick, solid blocker guy. They could bring him back on the cheap. Overall, this is a really good room. They don't need to do really anything in the draft, in my opinion, or in free agency per se. Maybe pick up a fourth, fifth guy, depending on what you do with John Fitzpatrick. He's a restricted free agent. Tyler Davis is an unrestricted free agent. Overall, they're in a pretty good spot here. On to the wide receiver room now. This is the area that they need to attack. Just like the depth on the interior and the offensive line in general, they need to add some depth in the wide receiver. I mean, they've got some depth, but they've had some injuries. There's some question marks going forward. Romeo Doubs, the concussion things. Like, I'm worried about his health, and I want him the best for him, and those things you got to work through, and the doctors are going to get with him, I'm sure, and discuss all those things. He's a really young guy, and he's had so many concussions. I hate to see that, but that is a serious question mark, and it's going to be something we have to think about in this draft. You got Malik Heath, Dontavian Wicks, Bo Melton as some nice depth behind these guys. I like Wicks a lot. He's just got to catch the ball more consistently. I think he could be a true number one wide receiver if it weren't just for the dropsies that he has. Christian Watson's likely out for at least half of the season, probably 3/4 of the season, maybe more. He could be out for the entirety of next season. So there goes one of your top deep threats. You got Jaden Reed, gadget, you jet sweep machine. They love to do those jet sweeps, man. And Jaden Reed's really good at that. He had a little bit of a down year considering dealing with a little bit of injuries of his own. However, I think Reed is a really good football player. And what he does, he's one of the better receivers at that. So I think that you've got some playmakers in here, but some question marks looming with Christian Watson, with Romeo Doubs. We're going to need to address this. I think this is an area that they need to go back into the draft and add a couple of playmakers into this room for just security purposes, and then also with their philosophy of they don't necessarily want a true number one wide receiver. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have a number one wide receiver, of course, but Gutekunst already said he likes to have a lot of guys in there, a lot of different playmakers to feed the ball to. So I'm going to be looking at maybe double dipping in the draft. On to the running back position, Josh Jacobs, a stud. One of the best running backs in the NFL this season. Another great signing from Brian Gutekunst. The one thing I will give him credit for, he found some studs in free agency this offseason. And Josh Jacobs was one of those guys. He was the machine. He was the engine to their offense. And sometimes I was just like, give Josh Jacobs the ball more. Come on, dude. It was working. And yeah, he is really, really good. Emmanuel Wilson's a good player too. Marshawn Lloyd, when he gets back healthy next year, had so many different alignment things this year. It was crazy, the injuries he was dealing with. So hopefully he gets back healthy and can be the lightning to Josh Jacobs' thunder. And besides that, A.J. Dillon, I know he bleeds Green Bay. I wouldn't be shocked if he comes back, but it's going to have to be for the cheap. Going on to the quarterback position, you got Jordan Love as your franchise quarterback. Maybe not as good of a season as he had, like especially at the end of the season. Like we're all like having, oh my goodness, he's a top 5 quarterback. Not so fast yet, but I still think he's just fine and continuing to progress along. He had to deal with some injuries of his own this season. Malik Willis stepped up and played really, really well. Honestly, I think he was maybe the reason they were able to end up making the playoffs with the way he was able to play when filling in for Jordan Love. So a lot of credit to Malik Willis and a lot of credit to this coaching staff too, Matt LaFleur. Now, I do think that Jordan Love, in an area that this offense can get better at, is taking what you're given, especially in those short yardage situations and the goal line opportunities. They need to get a little bit better about that. They're a team that looks for some big plays. They like those explosive plays, and they get a lot of those. But at the same time, sometimes you gotta be able to just take what what you're getting in front of you, right? And that's my biggest gripe, I would say, with Jordan Love going forward. So I want to see him take that next progression, that next step to be able to be more consistent in that regard. Overall, I'm not worried about this in the draft. Let's go into the defense side of the ball, and let's start with the defensive interior. And the defensive interior, I feel like that right now, Kenny Clark is underdeveloped. Like he always has these couple of games each and every season where it's like, oh man, that's vintage Kenny Clark. That's a stud, man. And then I'll won't hear his name called for the next 5 games. So that's kind of the thing with Kenny Clark. Little inconsistency. So I want to just state that with my rating. Still a good football player. I don't want to hate on Kenny Clark because he is a good football player. But that is my one little nitpick, my one little gripe with him is just want to see a little bit more consistency to his game. TJ Slayton, one of the better run defenders in the NFL. He is a free agent. I don't think he'd be super expensive to bring back. I would try to bring him back. Maybe he's not the perfect scheme fit, but I still think he'd be a good guy to bring back for their room. You got Carl Brooks, Devontae Wyatt. Devontae Wyatt's actually stayed. He's their best pass rusher on this interior. Carl Brooks, really solid pass rusher too. Colby Wooden, a solid rotational guy. They have a little bit of depth here. You can always go back into the draft, maybe add another big man into the room, depending on what you do with TJ Slayton, or they could just use a little bit more of another big guy in the room anyway. You got Keith Randolph. Keep an eye out on him. I think he was a nice I liked him coming out of Illinois as a developmental one tech. He's got some traits there. Overall, this is something I'm not super worried about. It's kind of either if you can get a stud in the first round, like a Kenneth Grant or a Tyleek Williams, I would consider one of those guys, especially depending on what you do with TJ Slayton. I think that either one of those dudes would be a monster fit for their defensive interior. Besides that, though, I'm not overly concerned about it. They've got some quality guys. They got some good rotation in the room. This is the area more or less that I would say I'm focused on is finding some more edge rush and more consistency pass rushing wise. This was a huge problem for them this season. I was consistently where's their pass rush? You go in just most recently first the Eagles. You wonder why they won that game. The Eagles dominated them on both sides of the line. They couldn't stop Jalen Carter at all, but that's a whole side story. He should never have fallen to them in the first place. But their pass rush was non-existent. Hurts had all day to throw, and I'm like, dude, come on, you got to get after the quarterback. And part of it is they don't blitz a whole ton. Jeff Hafley, I will say this, he remarkable job this season. For what he had, the personnel with the injuries and stuff like that, I thought they did an excellent job. So I don't want to hate on their defense too much because Hafley was unbelievable. But the one area that I do think that they're going to have to really focus in on is getting more consistent pass rush next season. So that is the area that I'm looking at here, is finding another edge rusher in here. Rashawn Gary has really underperformed this season. Kingsley Enagbare at times I felt like was their best pass rusher. Lucas Van Ness, still a lot of talent to be tapped into. He's a really good power rusher, but that's really about it. I mean, he needs to put some more counters into his game. Brenton Cox, I like him as a situational pass rusher. Aaron Mosley as well, I like him too. But besides that, like, they're going to need somebody else in this room to be able to come out here and add some more oomph. They need some speed off the edge. I feel like that's really what they're missing, is some more consistent bend to go along with the power. They got a lot of power rushers, but we need to bring a little bit more juice off the edge, a little more bend and explosiveness to threaten these tackles with a little bit more different possibilities out here. So that's what I'm looking at. And then on to the linebacking room. Edgerrin Cooper. Whoo, man, Cooper was a beast. Dude, I'm telling you, I was going into the draft this past time and I was thinking, well, maybe you take Edgerrin Cooper more like a round 2 guy. They're talking about him round 1. I don't know about that. No, he should have gone round 1. This dude's a stud, man. He's a crazy blitzer. And then you talk about a guy that's hunting dudes down in the run game. Oh my gosh, he's got that sideline to sideline range. And even in coverage, he wasn't bad this season either. So I think they found a number 1 linebacker. Let's put it that way. He's on his way to becoming a superstar. Quay Walker, solid linebacker, their leading tackler this season. And he's not a bad football player. I don't think he's lived up to that first round draft pick. I wouldn't give him the 5th-year option, which would end up being like, what, $14, $16 million at linebacker, because that's too much. If you can work on an extension, what they've talked about, trying to keep him for the long haul, I'm fine for that. I think that'd be a good idea. Just, it's got to be in the right range. Besides that, though, you got Isaiah McDuffie, had a nice, solid season. Eric Wilson was really coming out of the gates firing this season. You got Tyron Hopper from Missouri, another, 3rd-round selection. So they're pretty good. I would just recommend bringing back McDuffie and Wilson if you can. And then maybe get a little special teamer in here at the end of the draft or in free agency, because their special teams unit did struggle between kick returning and then just also returning punts too and kicks. Like, they got to do a better job about all those things. So we'll take a look at all that. Besides that, though, I think they're at a good spot linebacker-wise. On to the cornerback room. And this just comes down to injuries. Jair Alexander, what do you do? The conversation with Jair Alexander. Here's my belief. I would seriously get Jair Alexander in the room, talk about the reality of the situation and what they need to do going forward, because they really need to keep Jair Alexander. I would not personally cut him. If it's the last case scenario, you try to trade or you move on from him. That's what you do. But I would get him in the building, say, look, can we get a little bit of a pay cut? We'll restructure some of your money. We'll give you some money up front so that it's a win-win scenario. And that way, Jair it has some money coming in, but at the same time, you get a little bit of a pay cut. Maybe you're talking like $5 million pay cut, $6 million pay cut, just to help everything out with that cap number. And also, he's got like, $16 to $18 million coming cash flow in this year. That's a lot of money to pay to a guy that's only played, 15 out of the last 37 games. I just can't see them doing that. There's a lot of David Bakhtiari vibes going out here with Jair Alexander. He's a great football player, one of the best cover men in the NFL when he's out on the field. But that is the thing, is the injuries. So that's why I'm saying he needs to take a little bit of a pay cut if possible, and then you work out a restructure from there. That would be my recommendation. And then the last case scenario would be to trade or to release him. And then you got Carrington Valentine, solid corner. I think that they could certainly look at upgrading there. Again, I think he's going to be a guy that competes for a roster spot, or not just a roster spot, but for a starting spot. And he's a great roster spot to have, and somebody as a 4th corner that I would feel great about. But at the same time, I do think they could use an upgrade there. Eric Stokes hasn't worked out. Corey Ballantyne, nice little backup. Maybe they bring him back on the cheap. You got some young guys, Kamal Hayden, maybe he develops and whatnot. Kalen King, maybe another guy. Javon Bullard was able to play in the slot for them for injuries. Keyshawn Nixon was able to kick out to the outside with Valentine, with Alexander being injured and ended up the season on IR. Nixon, I will say I've been a little lower on Nixon. He had his best season from my eyes this year. Now, I don't know if I don't see him as a number 1 corner like he was talking about or anything like that. I know he doesn't want to return kicks anymore on punts, and he did, obviously for the Eagles game, that was a costly fumble there. But overall, I think they can find a return man in the draft and also find a little bit of corner depth too. And you can keep Nixon in the slot. I think that's fine. Just keep him right there. No worries about that. Bullard can be a rotational player, can play safety, give you a little bit of depth in dime situations, stuff like that. I will be double dipping this cornerback room. I think this is an area that they need to look at in the draft and look at in the draft. Just like they did the safety position, this is kind of what they need to do at the cornerback position from last year to this year with that and double dipping and addressing that for once and for all. Speaking of the safeties, this is not a need. They are looking great, honestly. Evan Williams is promising as he's looked as a rookie. Javon Bullard, I think, will get better and better. Xavier McKinney is the best safety in the NFL right now. It was just, he had one of the best seasons I've ever seen from his safety going back to the Ed Reed days. Very, very good season. Once again, Brandon Gutekunst finds a big-time hit in free agency. You got Zane Alexander, a nice, solid rotational guy. You got Oladapo. I liked him quite a bit coming out of Oregon State. He's another dude that I think could see some playing time for them. Gives you versatility there. So between Bullard, Anderson, Oladapo, Anderson, I believe, is a restricted free agent, so he should be back. They're in a really good spot all around. Let's transition to the free agency strategy now and start with the team cuts. As I talked about, I did think about Jair Alexander, but I can't do it. I can't. It's so difficult to cut Jair Alexander. As I talked about, work out a restructure, get a pay cut, a little bit of a pay cut, give him some money up front so that way it's a win-win and try to let bygones be bygones. I hate when, a lot of times they end up moving on from these players because of the injuries, and then the next season they bounce back and have big years. So I hate to see that. And then let's go to the team re-signs here, and starts with A.J. Dillon on the offense. I'm bringing him back. I'm a sucker for guys that bleed the football team, right? He loves Green Bay. He loves the city. What he does on and off the field for the city is instrumental. So I'm not letting a guy like that, but he's going to have to take a cheap contract. That's just what it is. If he's going to look for more than like 1.5, like that'd be the maximum I'd really be willing to pay him, then I would say you probably end up walking and letting him go. Ultimately, it's kind of got to be more like on a vet minimum type of deal. Besides that, though, I did let go of Josh Myers. It was a tough decision. It's going to be tough to find that reliability per se, but I feel like we can move Elton Jenkins inside to center, have Morgan start at left guard, and then Ryan at right guard, and then we could draft some guys. We can bring in a veteran as well. I think that's really the best case scenario going forward. Brandon McManus, I'm definitely re-signing him. 2 years, $9 million. He earns that contract. Very good season for him. He filled in there for them, and it was no turning back once he was in there. I put in $6 million for some restricted free agents. So as we talk about, like Zane Alexander, some other guys, on their offensive, defensive lines, etc. Defensively wise, I brought back TJ Slaton, 2 years, $14 million, $7 million average, which puts him in line with a lot of those nose tackles out there in the NFL right now, one techs, those big run defenders. And I think he's earned that contract as being one of the better run defenders in the NFL. And I think it makes sense to pay him that money. It's not too much money either to stomach. They have the cap space to be able to do it. Isaiah McDuffie and Eric Wilson will bring both of those guys back. A great linebacker depth in the room that we can keep and bolster that. Let's go on to some outside free agent signings, starting up with Charlie Heck. Heck yeah, man. Let's go ahead and bring him in there from the 49ers. He has some more depth. He can play left and right side. Just in case of injuries, you need to make sure you bolster up those guys there. And then you got Lucas Patrick. Also, it's going to be some nice depth, some veteran ability. He's back in Green Bay. Hey, he worked his way from a UDFA, and I think it's important to try to make that bygones be bygones, bring him back into the building. I think he'd be a nice player to add into where they're at right now. And then Charvarius Ward, 2 years, $28 million. Bring him in after a tough season, mentally, emotionally, physically, all that for Charvarius Ward, what he had to deal with his daughter. Tough situation, man, but, wishing him the best and hopefully he finds a good home, whether it's Green Bay or wherever it is. But if you can get him, that would be a great option. You bring somebody in as good of a cover man as he is on the outside, get you some size too with Jair Alexander, Keyshawn Nixon in the slot. We're not going to be done in this. We're still going to be drafting for the future for sure. But I feel like he comes in on a 2-year deal, $28 million. Very fair for a guy of his caliber and player talent, all those things, what he brings to the table on and off the field is going to be a massive upgrade in the secondary. And then I do compute $6 million into the draft picks there for their cap space, which gets them a little over $3 million, almost $4 million left over. And with some restructure, they could clear a lot more money if they wanted to. I didn't want to do that. I want to try to keep their cap in a good spot. Maybe Gutekunst, though, does restructure. As we talked about with Jair Alexander, you could restructure a little bit of money there, take a little bit of a pay cut. That would give them some more cap space. But for right now, as I talk about, I want to try to be a little more conservative with their cap, and that way they can keep their cap space in a really good spot because they've also got some guys to pay next season. Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker, you name it, right? They've got some young guys that I want to make sure we keep our core players around too. Now, going into the roster real quick before we get into the draft, one last look at the actual needs. We're still going to be looking at bolstering the offensive line depth. Tackle. Remember, Walker and Tom are both free agents. Maybe I think they bring back both, but that is something to think about. So we'll definitely draft somebody to develop, at least as a swingman, and then we'll draft somebody to develop at the guard position or interior in general. Wide receiver, I'm going to double dip. All right, we didn't pick up anybody in free agency. I just feel like it's too expensive to bring in a wide receiver there. Maybe they're in play for a Marquise Hollywood Brown type of guy, can stretch the field as much as they love those big explosive plays. That would be somebody I could consider seeing them, or Darius Slayton possibly. I could see Darius Slayton being a real target for this team too. Overall, I just decided not to go that route. I'm going to go draft and do a draft and develop their motto. Besides that, though, not really any other big needs on this offense. I think they're in a pretty good spot at running back, quarterback, obviously, and everywhere else, tight end. On the defense side of the ball, we're going to add another edge rusher. Another area that I didn't add in the draft, but I feel like we can add somebody in this draft. There is some good edge rushers in this class, so you better believe I'm going to go after that. Corner, I still am going to be looking at maybe double dipping at the cornerback position. Linebacker just needs a little bit of depth. That's probably a late 7th round type of pick for some special teams ability, especially if they can get better in special teams. That would not be a bad scenario at all. It's draft time, though, and with the number 1 overall pick, hey, Jeff Hafley's special. He's going to go get a man he's very familiar with, Donovan Ezeraku, Boston College. Oh, man, I am a huge fan of Ezeraku. I've been watching the edge rushers lately, and Ezeraku has been a guy that has risen up my board so much. This guy has got insane athleticism. He's explosive. He's twitched up. He's got those inside counter moves. And when I watch Micah Parsons, I'm like, okay, I see a little bit of familiarity there with Donovan Ezeraku. And he's strong, too, at the point of attack. Like, he's no slouch in the run game, all right? He's not going to be a pushover. He's not a guy that's just getting pancaked out there and wally mopped. He can hold his own, all right? He's definitely no slouch in that department. Yeah, he's going to have some limitations with his size. He's not the biggest. He's not the longest guy. He is going to give them that speed rusher that this team, in my opinion, they need. They need some speed, something other than just power rush out there. Ezeraku's going to be a sack machine. I don't care if he's a Will McDonald early on for this team. Like, that's what they need, if anything. On to round number 2, Azaria Thomas, cornerback, Florida State. Another guy that I'm a huge fan of. I've even mocked him in the first round. I like him a lot as a first-round pick. We'll see. I need to see him at the Senior Bowl first and foremost, but I believe this guy's got all the talent. He's one of the best one-on-one cover man in this draft, and he gives you that athletic profile too. I think he's a 4'4" guy. He's got the length to cover guys one-on-one in man coverage. He certainly has all the physical traits to do it. He does need to get strong. He needs to get better as a tackler. That's going to be his biggest area he needs to work on and show at the Senior Bowl, is that he's gotten bigger, he's gotten stronger, and he's a better tackler. Then we go on to Jalen Noel, wide receiver from Iowa State. This guy's got some speed, and he's got some creativity as well as a route runner. And as I'll talk about, they're going to need another big play threat with Christian Watson more than likely being out for either the entirety of the season or a good chunk of the season. So I'm going to do that here with Jalen Noel and what he brings to the table with that speed and creativeness as a route runner. He was so good there. Him and Jaden Higgins for Iowa State. Great 1-2 punch. Oh, my gosh. And I'm double dipping the wide receiver position. I'm going Chamari DK from Florida. This guy, just recently when watching the tape on this dude, he is a solid, I mean, you talk about Ricky Pearsall Jr., what he did. DK, he's an interesting prospect, man. He's got some route running nuance to his game as well. He's a good athlete. Another dude that made a lot of big plays. And when they were able to get that pass game going with Lagway, he really was a huge part of their offense. It's like, Lagway, where's DK? Where's DK? Making tons of plays down the field. Why not double dip, man? We're going to figure out this receiver position and make sure we have plenty of playmakers for Jordan Love. Connor Colby's going to be the next pick here in the 5th round, just trying to bolster that interior offensive line. He has left guard and right guard availability and a versatility for him, and he's somebody that has some athleticism. He's a mean mauler in the run game. He needs to work on his pass protection. He still has problems in that area, and he has some balance issues. But with the right development, you get Stenavich with him, Adam Stenavich, the offense coordinator and O-line coach. You let him develop him for a season or two and see how you go along there. But nonetheless, get some more youth in that room, more draft and develop prospects here with some upside. Connor Colby definitely has that. Next pick, John Williams, another guy. I have not watched the tape on this dude, but I hear he's been getting some hype. He's got some size to his game. He's got some length. He's got some athletic traits. So he will be a guy that I'm going to keep a close eye on. He is going to the Shrine Bowl, I believe. So he's definitely going to be on my watch list very, very soon, and absolutely at the Shrine Bowl, which is coming up. So Watch out for John Williams. If nothing else, though, he gives you some ability at that tackle position to be able to be a swingman and a developmental guy. Then we go on to Marcus Harris, California, the Bear, the Golden Bear. And they're going to get themselves somebody that has some inside-out versatility, but I see him as a slot guy. Give Keyshawn Nixon a little bit of run for his money there, at least a draft and developmental corner, just bolstering up that depth. As I talked about, I want to make sure we nip that cornerback spot in the butt once and for all. Make sure we've got some guys for the future as well as right now. Final pick of the draft, we're selecting Gathan Bernadelle from Stanford, the linebacker. He's a ferocious tackler. Another guy they need to watch more of, but whenever watching Stanford, Bernadelle's been making plays. He could be a good special teamer for them and somebody with the athletic profile that I feel like would definitely fit that demeanor that we're going to be looking for and add some more depth at the end of the draft. So go get GB here, help fill that linebacking void. Go ahead and recap everything up here. Coaching-wise, I think they're in a pretty good spot. Matt LaFleur, really good coach. Yeah, I want to work on some of those short yardage scenarios a little bit, goal line opportunities, getting better in the red zone. Those are all areas I think they can focus in on a little bit more, Jordan Love, etc. But overall, they're in a pretty good spot. Aaron Stenavich is the OC and offensive line coordinator. Defensively wise, Jeff Hafley was their MVP in my opinion. So I think that he's, you're locked in with a good defensive coordinator going into next season to continue to build upon that. And we've added pieces to make that better. Draft-wise, free agency-wise, Gutekunst, you got to get some depth on this offensive line. You got to add playmakers. And hopefully we did that with Jalen Noel, Chamari DK, going to give them some much needed depth and firepower in that receiving room, even if Christian Watson's out for the entirety of the season. You got John Williams, Connor Colby in the draft, Lucas Patrick back in the Green Bay uniform, and then Charlie Heck has some more depth. You got Jacob Munn going into sophomore season. Elton Jenkins, we move him over to guard. You got Jordan Morgan at left guard. I feel good about this offensive line. It's not going to be perfect. Okay, there's going to be a little bit of time, a little bit of gel that they're going to need to do, but I feel like they're in a pretty good spot here and at least have some depth. So if injuries arise, they should be in a much better spot than they were last year or in this last season. On to the defense side of the ball, my focus was adding in secondary and adding in more pass rush. Now, in terms of interior defense line, I would have liked to spend a pick on that, but just kind of the way it worked out. I just felt like Donovan Ezraku, let's get a stud in the first round who's going to give you a much-needed boost to the pass rush. He's going to be able to get after the quarterback, be a sack machine. Even if he's just a situational pass rusher early on, like they need that. They need somebody that could be a sack machine. And I feel like Ezraku is going to be exactly that for them with their power that they have. And just imagine a package like this. You got Lucas Van Ness up at 5 tech, Devontae Wyatt up at the 1 tech / nose, whatever, rushing the passer with Rashawn Gary on the opposite end, and then Donovan Ezraku maybe next to Lucas Van Ness. That's your rushing package. And maybe you have Edrin Cooper as your 5th guy if you're going to bring a blitz. That would be insane up the A-gap. Like, that would be crazy. Something like that. That gives you that ability to do that. So I really like Ezraku and what he brings to the table. Cornerback-wise, we brought in Charvarius Ward, but we weren't done there. You got Jair Alexander back, maybe on a restructured deal. Azaria Thomas going to be able to develop for behind Jair Alexander and Charvarius Ward. You got Marcus Harris has some more depth there, maybe some special teams ability, Keyshawn Nixon. And then at linebacker, you get JB in there. Is going to be some more special teams as well. So that's kind of what we did here to recap everything up. Let me know your thoughts and your opinions on it for Green Bay and what you would do differently or what you think that they really need to be focusing on. I hope you guys have a really good day. Go get your cheese heads out there and light it up, man. Hope you have a cool one.